sometimes sad, she's sometimes happy. She's doing things to make her life less crappy. Trying a treatment that's new on the scene. Let's sit back and talk about ketamine.
Welcome to Ketamine Insights, a show about mental health and psychedelic medicine. This podcast is made by and for people who use psychedelic medicines for healing. I've been using ketamine to treat depression for several years, and my co-host Lynn is a longtime ally and friend to people with mental health challenges. Ketamine Insights is a cumulative podcast. We recommend that new listeners start with episode 1, especially if you're looking for practical advice about how to get started with medicinal ketamine. Today we're talking about the differences between using ketamine and other psychedelics for healing versus using them to improve work performance. We also get to hear from Lynn about her visit to the Shipibo people in Peru, where she learned how they use ayahuasca for spiritual and medicinal purposes. It's a great episode. If you enjoy it, please follow us and leave a review. Thank you. Hello?
Hello.
Are we recording? Yes, I think we are. Okay, great. I wanted to talk a little bit about the way that ketamine is being used now outside of the healthcare setting and outside of the rave or party setting as well. I've looked around a little bit and found professional coaches using ketamine mini retreats for clients who want to improve their work performance.
Oh,
It's this whole like
I was just like on the NPR show that I was listening to that you shared with me, It's Been a Minute, as they were talking about like the whole thing about like people in the work world, mostly like Silicon Valley, but I think it's not just Silicon Valley, but it is a lot in that world. People that are so obsessed with work and their work life blends into their personal and maybe spiritual life that, you know, there's this idea for a lot of us, and as like a mission-driven professional, there's this part of me that identifies with this, where there's like a blurring of my personal and professional life. But in the Silicon Valley world, when they use psychedelics sometimes, that it's like, why would you want, there was the question asked, why would you want to have your sort of personal and spiritual life or your personal spiritual journey be used to further your professional life? You know, like, doesn't that seem like realms that you want to keep separate? Which I could see why that's a good question for some people. But then I think for some of us, it's like, well, they're so interconnected. And I feel like, well, if you're in a startup, like in the tech world, I don't know, are they interconnected? Like for me, it seems like how interconnected could they be? But they were saying that in the show that is kind of the culture that the startup world tries to promote, is that, yeah, it has to be like all in everything. Right. And then I think for a lot of people that are in a really like mission driven or social impact kind of career, also you don't have a lot of boundaries sometimes between your personal world and life and your professional. Like everything about you is committed to what you're doing professionally in a way. That's just instantly what I thought of when you said, like, you know, career coaches, professional coaches, and it's like your whole life is kind of focused on certain values and goals.
Right. I think
but it's like, weird. It's a little weird. The idea of doing that is a little weird, but at the same time, I could see it. Like if everything that you do in your life is committed to a certain thing, you're trying to improve and sharpen yourself.
Yeah, it is a really interesting question, the like bring your whole self to work type movement. And like I totally understand what you're saying about when you're mission driven, or you work for a mission driven organization, you kind of throw yourself into this work that it's for some people it's a calling, for some people it is spiritual, for some people it is, you know, it's values based. And then in a lot of other intense work environments, it's just a matter of like, it's sort of all encompassing, right? Whether you're a lawyer working 120 hours a week or a startup person who's getting every meal at work, and it's like it's a lifestyle, not just a job. And I think it's like, it's a dangerous, it can be spooky because you might feel much more loyal to that job than that job feels to you.
So true. So true. Yes.
Yeah. And like a lot of the time the values don't coincide, right? Like
Yeah.
even if you are working for an organization that's mission driven like you are, in some ways, somehow those, it's important to keep in mind that your values are yours and you can't just like outsource that part of your life to any kind of institution, any other organization, especially one that's not like spiritually mature. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one thing if you want to do that for a religion that like has thought about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. So tell me more about the career coach or professional coaches thing.
I mean, it's similar to these like ayahuasca retreats that you hear about in Costa Rica or other places where CEOs and celebrities will use like traditional medicine as like a quick fix, and they say it's like 10 years of therapy in 2 days. And I mean, to me, it's a scary approach in part because like you don't know what's going to come up when you do a ketamine trip, like or ayahuasca even more so is my understanding. Totally. Like it's a deeply personal experience, and to me it's like intrusive to think about doing it for work specifically. And it's also like not clear to me that if that's the kind of mission and intention that you go in there with, you may not be ready at all for what comes up.
Yeah.
And you may not be in a good environment for what comes up. If they're thinking about, I don't know, annual returns and like leadership styles.
That's weird.
And then something comes up about a traumatic experience in your past, or, it's just not an appropriate linkage.
Oh my God. Yeah, that could be so weird. I would think, what kind of psychedelics are they using at these? Did it say?
Ayahuasca is a big one. So they do.
I mean, yeah, that goes really deep. I would think, you might, I mean, a lot of people, have been through some traumatic things in their lives and have, gone on to whatever the successful career is that puts them in this retreat. So they're supposed to be thinking about returns and like you said, improving themselves, and they're going to have all kinds of experiences.
Right. Or like my relationship with my father needs to be rethought and stuff like that. And like, I know people come out with a sense of clarity, and that can be helpful at work. I'm not saying it doesn't like work, but it seems like a very like thin use of an ancient medicine.
It does. It really does.
Like I heard Judd Apatow on a podcast by Mike Birbiglia, I think a comedy podcast, saying that he did ayahuasca and he had no preparation whatsoever. He didn't research it. He didn't look into it. And Mike Birbiglia was surprised. And Judd Apatow kind of shrugged it off and he's like, what am I going to do? Like go on YouTube and find a bunch of people puking their brains out? Like, I don't want to poison my mind with like things like that before I do this drug.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I think you'd like think about it, set an intention. I feel like you would have some thoughts on how you might prepare. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think watch the YouTube videos, but I don't know.
Right. I thought that was such a like little insight into how to prepare for psychedelics, that the idea was like do nothing or watch some YouTube videos.
Yeah, that seems like what my like 8-year-old would say about it.
Yeah. So this like, the idea of like spiritual preparation or setting an intention or like, creating a relationship
read
with
some
the facilitator.
Books, meditate on it. Right. Yeah, all kinds of things. Talk to your therapist, talk with friends, talk with others who've been through the experience. Oh my God, there's so many things.
I think in part this is like a problem with information just getting out there, that people don't understand the gravity of these experiences, and access is a bit it's so easy for a wealthy person to purchase a retreat to Costa Rica and have access to these powerful experiences.
So true. That's so true. Whereas for a lot of people, it's like something you would save up for and think about for such a long time, because it'd be so much money and like the amount of time that you would have to take off from work or whatever, and such a commitment. So you would spend a lot of time preparing for it and thinking about it. You're not just like, oh, I'm just going to drop this and just watch a quick YouTube video if I need to think about it. And
and especially for people who are doing it for mental health reasons, like the consequences are just greater and the hopes
Yeah.
are higher.
That's what
and the
I would
risk.
think too. I'd be scared about potential negative consequences and then also like the potential really positive consequences.
If you're dealing with depression or something else, like you just want it to work so bad that you're going to
Yeah,
do your research, you're going to try to maximize the opportunity, like increase
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
chances that it'll actually work for you.
Yeah.
Um,
And he just kind of did it for fun. He's just like, I'm just going to give this a
I
try.
guess, yeah. And I don't
Like, just going to have a trip.
I don't feel like it's for me to say how people should use these
Yeah.
drugs.
Good
I do
point.
think it's like very important to think about the indigenous communities that these
Yeah.
drugs are coming from and like how commercialization and commoditization of these substances affects the original source.
Totally.
But it's not impossible for those things to live side by side, but I just am it's just such a different way to use these medicines
Absolutely. Yeah.
that like I in some ways I'm sure it might be better to be out in the jungle in a beautiful environment like Costa Rica than being in a clinic somewhere on a bed with your like I told you once I did a infusion in a clinic on a regular hospital kind of
Oh,
cot
yeah.
bed thing with
Yeah.
stirrups.
Oh, sounds awful. Yeah.
Like they
Stirrups.
like folded them up and like, for
Yeah.
OBGYN,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Ugh,
like they
yeah.
folded them up and it's just you feel so medical
Yeah.
and so sterile and so that like,
Yeah.
I'm sure being in a beautiful environment would be way better than that. Yeah. I don't know. There's all of these different kind of ways that these worlds are colliding, like professional and
Totally.
capitalistic and commercial endeavors with psychedelics right now.
Yeah.
Like there's some organizations, some companies are providing ketamine assisted psychotherapy as a mental health benefit outside of any health insurance or anything like that.
Okay. That's
And I think
cool.
that's a really interesting, like, it's weird to me for a company to choose what therapies are available to you and what therapies aren't. At the same time, health insurance
Yeah.
isn't covering something that's clearly beneficial to so many people.
Yeah.
It's like a cool benefit. I wish I worked
Yeah.
at a company like that. It would save me a lot of money.
You know what? A question that just came to my mind on this like whole subject of, the indigenous peoples and these medicines and, capitalism affecting all of this is I wonder what's happening to the supply chain of ayahuasca. Having been in the Shipibo community where they use ayahuasca traditionally and had like a very small amount of tourism from foreigners using it. It's like, people harvest it at this, it's like this vine that's harvested at this, in communities traditionally, like just grows naturally and it's harvested at this very small amounts and produced traditionally. But I wonder how it's being produced now at this increased volume to be able to be made at the volume that they need for these retreats in Costa Rica and how they're getting it to Costa Rica. Are they like growing it on plantations in the Costa Rican rainforest now? I wonder what they're doing.
How do they
Who's doing
meet that
Who's making
demand?
money off of it? Yeah. How are they meeting that demand? I'm so curious.
And to me, one of the interesting things too is like, how are they meeting the demand for the substance itself? And how are they meeting the demand for the facilitators and the shamans and the people who
Yeah.
guide you through these journeys? That like, there's just no way except for word of mouth to know if they're any good at what they do.
Yeah. No, I've read that like in some of these Costa Rican retreats that it's like Peruvian shamans from the indigenous groups that are up there in Costa Rica that may like spend part of the year there in Costa Rica doing it. I'm sure they're training people, and there's probably like Costa Ricans that are, trying to get trained and sort of take over the trade. I bet there's this whole, dynamic that's happening where it's sort of like who will own the shamanism, and who owns being
Right.
able to facilitate the actual doing the trips and leading these. And it's probably going to
Right.
change over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are better actors and worse actors in the field.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
people who are, better at it and more interested in doing it for personal improvement,
Yeah.
spiritual growth, whatever, and other people who are
Absolutely.
like, take this
People are
now,
just
see you
like-
later. Right. I mean, you
Yeah.
see this professional coach that I found, her website, and she's in California, doesn't seem to have any qualifications as a therapist or as a, any background. She's a professional coach. So I was looking through her website trying to find how she would be good at ketamine assisted therapy.
Yeah.
And I just didn't see any really even claim to that. Like that's not even what
She
she's
didn't need to
trying
make a
do.
claim to it. It was just like, nope, this is just like, this is standard these days. I'm a professional coach and I'll take you to Costa Rica, and there's lots of people that will meet
For
this
her, it
demand.
wasn't even Costa Rica. It was just ketamine, so it was local. But I don't
Oh, I
think,
see. Oh,
I don't
because it was
know.
ketamine. Yeah. Okay.
She signs you up with a prescriber, I guess. I'm not really sure how the
Okay.
chain works, but it's like you just like go to a resort for 2 days or 3 days and
Oh.
do some ketamine each day or something and come out of it feeling much better about your performance as a CEO or so, I guess. I mean, yeah.
Huh.
And I don't mean to be talking shit
Yeah.
about every other way to do ketamine.
I
It's just
know.
like, it's a striking difference to me between the way I've always thought about using psychedelics for mental health and the way other people are
Yeah.
thinking about it to like optimize performance. I know like Elon Musk said something about like, someone was asking him, is it okay for you to be doing these drugs and like be in charge of all these companies? And he said, well, the stock price of my companies has gone up by this much in the past this many years. So whatever I'm taking, I
Yeah.
should take more of it.
Yeah.
And that kind of push toward efficiency and performance. Here's the thing that gets me about it
Hmm.
is like when we talk about using ketamine for mental health, one of the things that we talk about, right, is like a patient-centered approach to mental health. You're not laying back and letting the medicine do its work. You're an active participant. You're the primary healer. We have, talked about this over many different episodes, and it's a different paradigm for mental health.
Hmm.
And the way you interact with the mental health infrastructure under that paradigm is very different. And that's important. It's an important difference, especially within mental health, where like people have been locked up. We've had generations and generations go by where people are locked up for things that we no longer think are an illness at all.
Yeah.
And so it's important that like that patient-led perspective is very important in mental health. And I think that like when you're bringing a new paradigm like that, like the ketamine and other psychedelics are naturally upending, like they naturally help you create different orders of thinking, different ways of thinking, right? And so it makes sense to be like interrupting the existing hierarchies.
Hmm.
And it's just a striking difference in that paradigm versus reinforcing the hierarchies that exist through like using ketamine for capitalist ends.
Yeah.
Um, Also, these people who are using it for, performance optimization at work, kind of think they're being counterculture in some cases by doing
Yeah.
it. It's like you're literally making yourself into a tool. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Just making yourself more productive, more efficient, like you're just an automaton for like the system, for the man.
yeah.
Yeah.
And using spiritual experiences to make rich people richer.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
weird.
It is a little weird. They'd say make them making themselves richer.
Right. Both.
Yeah. And other people richer. Rich people richer. Other rich
Right.
people richer. Yeah. I know, but that's a good point. So
I think
yeah.
it's an important difference of like, people used LSD in the 60s is the same kind of idea that like you have to like work against the man, like fight against the system. And there's a big
Yeah.
difference between using psychedelics for like fighting existing hierarchies or rethinking existing hierarchies, I should say,
Versus
versus
perpetuating the hierarchy and the system
mhm.
and the man, which basically is now Elon Musk.
Yeah,
It's like now Elon Musk perpetuating the system that he has built, and then
right,
others just like strengthening that system and wanting to be like him and
right.
supporting him.
And
This
going
is
to like
interesting.
such huge extents to make that happen. Like,
Hmm.
ketamine, I've not done ayahuasca, but it's intense,
Oh yeah.
like you're pooping, you're puking, you're talking to God. Like
Yeah. 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 That's a
It's a
lot.
lot
It's a
to
lot
handle.
to just want to like write better code or be more efficient at whatever it is that you're doing in that world.
Right. I think even for me, I'd like to think of myself as a mission-driven person. My
Mm-hmm.
career was all involved in public service.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have thought of intentions for infusions,
Yeah.
I had trouble being so prescriptive as to like I never put forth an intention that was like, how do I better serve? In part because it seems too like transactional. Like,
Mm.
you know, if you show me like transactional or prescriptive, like tell me how to do this thing that I already know I want to do is
Yeah.
not really that's not really the model for intentions that I was taught and that I usually go by. Is like you don't go in with a demand, you go in with a question. And so like
So so give me an example of that. So like what would your question be as opposed to going into your session saying, I want to come out better able to serve, whether that's through your job or something else, you're saying your question would be,
you might go
remind
in
me.
thinking something more like how can I better live my values, how can
Okay.
I or like show me about service, like let's
Yeah.
talk about my
Okay.
relationship with service. It's more about like if you consider service a spiritual endeavor, then like how can you better live out that value as opposed to like how can you logistically do it better.
Yeah. 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 Okay. I see what you're saying. I wonder what the intentions are that tech bros generally set, or if they do set intentions,
It's a great question.
or if
Yeah,
they sort of make a
I'd
demand.
I'd love to like interview some people who use ketamine this way because I'm sure it's fascinating. And like there have been times when I've done a lozenge and had an insight that I think would have been useful when I was still able to work. I didn't go in with that hope, but it does because it helps you connect things that you don't otherwise think about connecting. I could see where it would be helpful for work.
Yeah.
Like I really
Yeah.
do. I think that's more true of like a lighter dose than a full trip
Yeah.
experience.
I
But
see.
I wonder how like yeah, what intentions they go in with, how they kind of moderate the experience. Is it about acceptance and openness, or is it about trying to like
Mm.
direct the experience in a certain direction? And maybe they've gotten good at, if the goal isn't openness, then maybe there is some value to that kind of like that kind of more directional approach. I've
Mm-hmm.
never done it that way. To me, the like point is always to be open and learn from the medicine and what the medicine wants to teach you, as opposed to thinking that you know best what will come out of that experience. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe there are other ways to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then maybe in the end, it's like, these medicines they have many uses and people hopefully will use them safely and they can be used for many things. And hopefully this kind of use doesn't like, like pose any risks to the kinds of therapeutic use, the ways that you've
Right.
used them and the ways we know that they can be really useful for mental health. But maybe there will be many more different uses that are discovered,
Yeah.
right?
I think that's a great way to put it. And I think one of the important questions is how do you want to use it? And in a way, it
Mm-hmm.
kind of reflects your own journey in life or your own
Yeah.
goals at the moment. It's like, are you trying to find spiritual enlightenment? Are you trying to heal mental illness? Are you trying to, just improve your life or have a fun experience like walking through a
Yeah.
forest one day? Or are you trying to like rubber hits the road or whatever and improve
Yeah.
something specific about your life?
Yeah. Yeah. And who
Because
knows what else it could be? I mean, maybe it'd be like musicians trying to like compose music, and it's
Mhm.
just opening up new neural pathways for writing music or poetry. I don't know. You can imagine different kinds of creative endeavors.
Yeah.
And
No, totally. And I think like the art that has come out of these experiences so far, like it's interesting. There's a lot of commonalities between the art that's come out of these things. Like even ancient art, you see a lot of the same patterns and stuff that people draw today when they're trying to explain or show what they experienced. So yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of like cool opportunities for research and learning when it comes to like different ways these medicines affect different people in different cultures and the similarities. I've heard one explanation of ayahuasca in particular. It was like ayahuasca has a way of treating a spiritual malady.
Mm.
And in the Western world, the learning that we tend to get from ayahuasca is about connectedness and interconnectedness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually specific to the Western world because we're so isolated and individualized that's a spiritual wound that we all share. And that happens to be the thing that ayahuasca normally does for people in the West. But actually in other cultures, it tends to have different messages altogether.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, makes sense. Now, what I remember from spending time in the Shipibo community in Peru with a shaman, and I never did ayahuasca myself, but learned a bit about what they used it for traditionally there, was like a couple of things they talked about. One was that they would use it for plant medicines and that they would take it because part of being a shaman was healing and understanding like the plants around them in the forest. And so they would say, if there's a new plant that we just don't understand what it does, what the medicine is, if we can use it for something, then we'll use ayahuasca and we'll have that plant there in the ceremony, and we'll journey with that plant basically, and we'll like look into the DNA of the plant and understand the plant and then like come to understand its uses and what it's for, and like you're like, what? Okay.
That's so cool.
And also then their designs that they draw that are like these crazy like maze like patterns they say are like the DNA of plants. They say it's the DNA of plants that they see during an ayahuasca journey. Like, so amongst many other things, I'm sure that the ayahuasca ceremonies, they call it a ceremony, is for them. I mean, that's the word in Spanish, but of course, like in their language, I'm sure they have many other words for it. But they talk about how it's about seeing like inside of plants, seeing what plants are and what they do and what they can give to people.
It's so
like a way of
interesting.
Understanding it.
Yeah, I've always wondered that when it comes to traditional medicine, how many things did you try before you discovered that this root was good on a burn?
Yeah,
I
know.
But it makes sense that there would be some intuition to that or and it's fascinating that ayahuasca would help you narrow that down and understand that better about a plant.
Totally. Yeah, it's so fascinating. And then there's still like in modern time, you think of all these things as being like passed down over generations as they are, but that people are still experimenting with them using ayahuasca is really interesting.
And your experience with them also was like they talked to you, didn't they, if I remember right, about like when someone is ready to go through an ayahuasca ceremony and when they're not, or not ready, but like how did
because they were very serious. This was a community they're not a community that hosted a lot of tourists. They weren't the kind of place where you could just like show up and be like, I want to do an ayahuasca ceremony. They were more of a little bit more of like a hard to get to community. There were some that were a little closer to, what's the name of the city, Pucallpa, where they more like kind of received tourists and would do sort of ceremonies for a little bit more whoever. I think this community, I was connected with them through a family friend that had been there and done an ayahuasca ceremony, and they were like, this was like the one group of Westerners that had gone there and done ceremonies before. And they had gone through like the cleansing and everything. So this community was like, they had a family of shamans. And so this very old man who was like almost 100 years old, his son who was around 80, and then he was training the next generation. And they said, if you wanted to go through an ayahuasca ceremony, you needed to do some sort of fasting and cleansing. I can't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks, but basically you needed to eat no meat, have no sex for either 1 to 2 weeks. And then a number of other kind of cleansing type things along those lines. It was like no sex, no meat, no alcohol, they would say that they would like be very concerned about performing the ceremony on you if you didn't follow these procedures, because you would be sort of unclean and you might have a bad experience, and they might have a bad experience as well. And they would say, well, you know, the other shamans might do this, but it's not the traditional way, and you wouldn't have the kind of experience that they thought should be had.
That's interesting. And
so they were like, I was kind of interested. I was like, oh, maybe I'll try it. And they were like, oh, like ask me these questions, you know? And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm qualified for that. And I don't have enough time to hang out here. I was there for like, you know, 4 or 5 days or something. Couldn't fully cleanse myself
in time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so they were like, skip it. Like,
they're like, you're not able to. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good example too. It feels like they're not incentivized in any other way besides like what's good for you, what's good for them, what's good for the community. They're not going to say like, yeah, go ahead and do it even if you don't have enough time, because we need the thousands of dollars that you're about to hand over.
Oh yeah. They weren't like, oh, you have $100. And they weren't even charging a bunch of money, I don't think, because they were like, they weren't like a commercialized sort of, they weren't one of these villages that has like the whole commercial setup with like places to stay. It was like, you're staying in our like family hut. We have like a tiny tent we set up for a ceremony. Like they don't have, it was not a big setup, but yeah, they were just like, no, this is not good, man. We cannot do this. This does not sound good. Yeah, you're not ready for this. You need to prepare yourself. You need a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
You know.
Were you disappointed, or were you like,
Yeah, I think I wasn't totally at the time. I mean, I was like 23, 24 years old. I was like very spiritually immature. So I was like interested, but I was also like kind of sensitive that I was not maybe mentally quite there yet. I knew that this was like a big deal and that I was maybe not fully ready to go there yet either, you know?
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, maybe it's good that I didn't, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe I need another 5 to 10 or so years to have that kind of a journey.
Do you know within that community, is there an age limit? Like, do people generally do it in middle age, or are there other rules?
I think it's definitely adults. It's definitely adults, and like the kids would always talk about it. The kids would whisper like, "Oh, ceremony! They're doing a ceremony," and it was definitely like adults only. And it was also like, it's not the kind of thing that people are doing regularly. It's very much like kind of the shaman family. And it seemed like sort of a lineage. It was like it's like sort of a shaman bloodline that generally do it. It's not like everyone is doing ayahuasca all the time. It was people are doing it to learn. This is what I remember. This is a long time ago now, is that people are doing it to learn about the medicines, the plant medicines. And then they're doing it for healing if someone's sick and they're trying to understand, like someone in the family or someone in the community, what's wrong with them and how to heal them. And there may have been other reasons, but that's what I remember about how it was explained to me. And then they would do it maybe if they're like leading someone else in a ceremony as some kind of a learning or spiritual journey. But the main things were like for them to learn about some medicines and then to heal someone. And then what I also remember of the community was there was this tension, as I know, of course, is like happens in a lot of places where there's traditional religion and traditional healing, is that there was like a whole evangelical movement. There was a little evangelical church that had sprouted up in a neighboring village. And so like half of the community had turned to evangelical Christianity. And in that church, they were saying shamanism is bad, traditional religion is bad. And the shamans were not Christians. They didn't believe in Christianity, and they were very much about their traditional beliefs. And so there was like this split in that community and it wasn't like about necessarily being about ayahuasca, but it was about the sort of set of traditional beliefs, which included shamanism and ayahuasca, but not necessarily ayahuasca at its center, as I understood it, but kind of traditional beliefs, shamanism, animism, you know, nature worshiping, that kind of thing, versus this like set of, you know, evangelical and in that church they were saying like the shamans are evil and ayahuasca's evil, specifically saying that. And I'm sure that kind of thing has probably just exploded, and it'd be interesting to know what's happening in those regions of the Amazon where like ayahuasca has become commercialized, and I'm sure the evangelical church has just grown as well.
Yeah. To go back a little bit to what you said about healing other people when they're sick and they don't know why, would
Hmm.
would that be the shaman doing the ayahuasca like in the presence of the sick person, or would they both be
Yeah.
doing it?
I think it can be both. This is from what I remember. Again, I'm like not the authority on this, but from what I remember, it could be both. Could be, but often I think it's just the shaman would do ayahuasca, or like the two shamans, because it was like, you know, a couple of generations. The shamans might do ayahuasca in the presence of the person, and they'll have tobacco. It's like a pipe. They'll have tobacco. They'll be smoking tobacco, and that's considered healing, and blowing it on the person. And so they'll do the ceremony and try to figure out through the ayahuasca what the problem is and how it can be healed. And so the idea is that the ceremony itself could be healing, but it also helps them to see in the presence of that person and with the help of the medicine what's going on and how they can heal it. And of course, I feel like, having lived in many developing countries where you have the tensions between Western medicine and traditional medicine, I'm like, I have a lot of thoughts about this and mixed feelings, because I think traditional medicine, you know, has its place and it's important culturally, and it can be important in communities, but it also can be destructive when, I mean, in this community, of course, they had virtually no access to Western medicines. I mean, it was like 2 hours by boat when a boat was available, and then further by road when during the dry season when a road was available to get to a town. It was very hard to get anywhere, you know, and people didn't have a lot of money. But I don't know what kinds of things then the shaman was saying should be done. You know, if there was a sickness, like if the shaman would say you should take medicine, or you should be, I don't know if there were harmful things that they would say should be done. Like once when I lived in Malawi, for example, a kid was bitten by a snake, and someone we knew and a healer said that he needed to be cut with a razor on the snake bite. And the healer kept cutting the kid on top of the snake bite to remove the venom, he said. And this kid ended up getting infection, like a worse infection, right? When he should have just been left alone, you know, but the family didn't believe the Western doctor. Just like a minor example of how, you know, the sort of traditional healer, with their thoughts on how to deal with something versus a Western doctor, can lead to something really bad. And an infection, sometimes when not dealt with, can lead to death or loss of a limb and all kinds of things. So, you know, it can be a little scary, but I love traditional healers, and it's fascinating and important and everything. But, you know, I don't know in this case, in that community, what kinds of things they were necessarily doing. And while I believe that this, like, ayahuasca definitely was teaching them so many good things about plants and medicines, hopefully they were also, you know, going and seeking out like antibiotics when they needed it.
Right. Yeah. I think both ways of thinking and healing have a lot to learn from each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember this I forget what Paul Farmer book it was, but there was a kid who was sick and they took him to the doctor, and then they took him to a traditional healer, and Paul Farmer went to the family and was like, what, I thought we had taken care of it. Why did you take him to the traditional healer as well? And the question the mom had back for him was, do you have no capacity for subtlety? It was like, or for complexity or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, we can do both. Both can help and both can heal.
Yeah.
And there's definitely destructive. And there's destructive parts to both ways of looking at it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was something that I've learned, just like with colleagues in all the countries that I've lived in, that everyone, all of my friends and colleagues have always been like, oh, did you go to like a Nepal? Like, Lynn, you should see the Ayurvedic doctor. And, you know, you should really be just like, drink your turmeric tea. But you shouldn't be on all those Western medicines. But like, maybe, but are you taking an antibiotic? You know, just like, you should really look into both at all times.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And both should be used intentionally, right? Like you shouldn't, there are a lot of people who are on way too many medicines. And I also, like, at the same time, like I'm on a good few, and people who raise their eyebrows, it's like, well, thanks, but no thanks. I don't need your opinion on this, you know? Yeah.
I know, exactly. And then, at one point in Nepal, I just stopped talking to my colleagues. I just stopped sharing with them because I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I didn't need to tell them about the medication that I was on. Like, thank you guys. I know you're doing it from a good place, but this is working for me. So
yeah, it's a problem with uninvited advice all over the world, I think.
Oh yeah. Everybody's got strong opinions, and there's so many different ways of approaching medical issues.
There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about with respect to like work and spirituality, which is like, I think also when we're talking about service or when we're just talking about like all-encompassing professions, when you conflate work and spirituality, you can end up reinforcing this idea that we have in Western culture and maybe all over the world of, you know, productivity equals worth.
Mm-hmm.
And that there is no value to just being, there's only value to doing. And I think like that's been a really important question for me as someone who became disabled in their 30s, is that like you really have to, and a lot of people face this when they retire as well, is like, what is my value if I'm not creating value in a commercial sense? And I think that disability studies has a lot to offer this question. This question also comes up with in conversations of AI, right? It's like if AI is going to be able to do a lot of the jobs that people do, then what will people do when people don't need to work? And how will we find worth in ourselves, and how will we value ourselves? And it goes to show a very like thin understanding of human worth when human dignity is not seen as inherent, but rather earned through work. And I think like when you're conflating work and spirituality, you can fall even further down that path of thinking that because you're a better performer, you're a better person, or you're more worthwhile. What does that say to people who are unable to work, to people who, you know, need assistance to get through every day? Like there's just it's deeply demeaning to a huge proportion of the population.
Absolutely.
And demeaning to yourself as well. That's not, you're worth more than that. You're not just worth the sum of your parts and the sum of your labor. That's not how it works.
Yeah. I think it's a great point. Yeah. And in the end, like, is that productivity? I can't help but think in the tech bro situation, is it all about just making more money? You know, is it just money? This is something I've just been thinking a lot about lately as someone who's facing unemployment in the near future. That's a whole nother conversation I don't want to get into, but just like, you know, money and employment and careers and everything, and what we're doing with our lives, what we do with our day to day, hour to hour and everything, right? Like all these big questions. So like the tech bros, and then wanting to have a spiritual journey to help them become more productive. Is it all just because they want to make more money? Is that what it is? Right? It's just they individually want to get richer, and they want to help their bosses get richer. And so they want to help everybody get richer. Like, it's weird to me. Like, I understand wanting to have money, to be comfortable, wanting to have a good life for yourself and your family and being able to help others. But it's hard for me to grasp. And maybe for some people this is strange, but it's hard for me to grasp this idea of just like wanting just like endless amounts of wealth, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
no, I think that's a great question. Right. My sense is that it is very different, actually, that it's not just money, because look at how unsatisfied so many rich people seem.
Yeah.
Elon Musk.
True. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, that like,
good point.
I think a lot of it is like money comes with approval, money comes with esteem and respect, and performing well comes with those same things amongst your peer group. So I think like performing well at work isn't just about money. It's often about prestige and respect as well.
Prestige, power. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's something else I've been thinking about. It's like this whole, like power, prestige, power, legacy, all these things.
Yeah. Tell me about it. There used to be a thing when I worked in the bureaucracy in DC, but also in the Senate, people talked about legacy issues. Like, oh, this is a legacy issue for the boss. Like he wants to be known for this. And it always meant like, we need to do this particularly well because it's part of the boss's legacy. And I always thought that the opposite was true, that like, if it's about his ego, then we don't actually need to worry about it. Like it's already not important because we're not doing it for the right purposes. Our goal is not about his legacy. Our goal is about the people that we serve every day.
But I would hear that too, I feel like, about ambassadors often, like toward the end of their ambassadorship. I would never hear an ambassador say it, but you'd start to hear people say like, oh, this is about his legacy. It's about his legacy. And like, everybody whispering about it. Like, this is really important for his legacy. I'd be like, like, is that why? Does that matter? Do I care about ambassador's legacy? Like, Is
It's
that
such
critical?
a like, yeah,
So like I'm busting
it's
my ass for this person's legacy, quote unquote legacy.
yeah,
I
it's really upside down. It's so
yeah.
obviously upside down. Are we here to serve him or is he here to serve us? Like, is
Yeah.
he here, is the population here to make him look better, or is it the other
Yeah.
way around?
All right. We veer
I'm
off
trying to,
topic.
yes, we have veered off topic. Okay, right? Are we good?
Yeah. I
Should
think
we
we're
sign
good.
off?
Yeah. I think we're good. This was good.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. I'll talk to you
Yeah.
soon.
Thank you. Okay. This is awesome. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. We're always interested to hear from you, so please email us at ketamineinsights@gmail.com. If you're someone who uses ketamine to improve your work performance, get in touch. We'd love to learn more. Please take a moment to subscribe and to review us on your favorite podcast platform. That helps us reach more people. Another way to help keep this show alive is to join our community on Patreon or Substack. Just go to either of those websites and search for Ketamine Insights. This podcast was hosted and produced by Molly Dunn. Lynn Schneider is our co-host, and our fantastic theme song is by Solid State Symphony. If you are struggling with mental illness or caring for someone who is, please find help. In the U.S., the National Alliance on Mental Illness is a good place to start. Until next time, remember to advocate for yourself and never ration your joy.